Hello and welcome to episode 170 of the Book Binge, this time covering some dystopian stories that I want to read. I don't have much for this list, hence why it is only a top 5 rather than a top 10. A list small enough that I even had to include a couple of technicalities here because I don't really have a whole lot of dystopian stuff on my TBR. But that said, I did want to give this sort of subgenre a shout and give some books that I definitely want to read a shout in a setting. That is not how English works. In a setting where they may, more easily shine through. Also, you may have noticed that I titled this video 5 dystopian stories I want to read. This is because, well, it's not just 5 dystopian books. One of these is actually a series, so I kind of had to change the title to accommodate for that just a little bit. Either way, let's start off with the list. This is going to be a shorter video for sure, with an item that I actually don't know how much I actively want to read it besides just a general completionist habit that I tend to have. Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, or The Evening Redness in the West. This might be the last McCarthy book I read at the time that this video comes out. It'll probably be just a few months from now when I actually give this a shot. It'll be the last new McCarthy book that I read. By the time I get to this, I'll have actually read all of his other books. In fact, at the time this video comes out, I'm like a month away from finishing all of the rest of his books, save for this one for the first time. Most of the reason I included Blood Meridian at number 5 of this list is because I needed something to round out the bottom and didn't really have anything else that kind of fit the bill, and I think Blood Meridian counts as dystopian enough. Most people might comment The Road, but that was actually the first McCarthy book that I read, and I've read like 6 of them at the time of recording this video, very close to the 7th, so it doesn't actually fit for this video because I've already read it. Either way, Blood Meridian is on this list, no matter how much I may or may not like that fact. Number 4 on this list is where the technicality comes into play. It is the series. This is The Maze Runner by James Dashner, a series that I have read the first book before, and I have read like half of the second book. This is one that I want to do the partial reread for of the books or the pieces of it that I have experienced, but then also read the rest of it. Definitely the first trilogy. We'll see about the prequels. I'm not sure entirely how interested I am in those. I might decide whether to read those based off of how much I like the main 3, but The Maze Runner, back when I read that, I remember being an all-time favorite at the time, and I enjoyed the movies definitely for what they were, albeit different from halfway through book 1 onwards. I think they're good films, even if not maybe great adaptations in certain regards, but I think this would be a real short and sweet series to read whether I include the prequels or not, and it is definitely on my list. Like I said, I really liked The Maze Runner back when I read that the first time, so I do want to reread it solely because I enjoyed it, and I want to read at least the next 2 books in the series. Number 3 on my dystopian stories that I want to read is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. One of the big 4 dystopian novels. This is the only one that I've not had interactions with before. Apparently, it's a pretty good time. Most of the people that I know who've read it really quite enjoy it for what it is, and it being so short makes it quite approachable. So, I want to get to this one soon, mostly because it is pretty short, not just because it's short, but also because it influenced to a major degree the next entry on this list, number 2, 1984 by George Orwell. Like I said in another video that I did recently, top 10 more classics that I want to read, I believe, I've read half of this book before, back when I didn't finish anything because I read 50,000 books at a time, or I was generally not in a mood for reading, whichever was the bigger problem at the time. Again, one of the big 4 dystopian novels, though this one I have had interactions before. The other 2 I have read before, Fahrenheit 451 and Brave New World. Both of those I've read and reviewed on this channel. This is the next big one that I need to read, but like I said, I want to read We first because, 1984 took a lot of inspiration from We. And then I also want to include on this list as a technical 6th entry, Animal Farm by the same author, not just because it's the same author, not just because, they're similar, because they're not exactly similar. Animal Farm is an all-time favorite that I do want to reread, so, because they're both pretty short, maybe I'll get to them in approximately the same time period, but I feel like it's worthy of discussing both of them in the same video. As for number one, this is going to be very different than the other options, even including The Maze Runner, which was itself very different from the other books that I've talked about on this list. This might technically be my most anticipated read on this list, because it's super popular, everyone says it's basically perfect, and also apparently The Stand by Stephen King, but better. Swan Song is the last entry on this list by Robert McCammon. Don't really have too much to say about this inclusion beyond what I have already said. It's a very popular book. Most everybody I know who has read it really likes it. Most people think it's even better than The Stand is, and The Stand has a very popular reception all on its own. And for that reason alone, I do want to read it. It sounds pretty good. Character stuff is stuff that I tend to enjoy, and apparently Robert McCammon is second basically only to someone like, say, Stephen King, or he's up there in the conversation. So, you know, maybe I'll really like this book too. So, those are my picks for this very short top 5 list. Lorien Legacies would have been my other pick if it made a tad bit more sense. That one's more of a sort of like sci-fi type of series. Not quite dystopian, but like could fit there depending on who you ask. Maybe the sequel series could fit there. I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, there are some other items that I wanted to be able to include on this list, but couldn't really because they're not like dystopian and not properly dystopian enough to actually fit to the list. But either way, those are some dystopian books that I want to read. If there are some other dystopian books and maybe some more properly dystopian stories that you think I should read, give them a shout in the comments, because there's a good chance I either don't know about them in the first place, or that even if I did know about them, I completely forgot about them, hence why they're not on the list. So if you want to give me some recommendations in the comments, I would greatly appreciate that. Next Tuesday, I'll be doing another Cormac McCarthy book review. Ironically, even though I talked about the fact that I would be reading my 7th McCarthy book here very soon, Tuesday's review is the 7th McCarthy book that I will be reading. At the time of recording, I haven't read it yet. At the time this video comes out, I've obviously read it. But that video will be coming out on Tuesday, so I hope you check that out when it does come out. If you're not interested, that's fine too. Either way, I will be back in the next video.